Hello there. You're listening to 10 Questions, where we discuss the wetplate collodion process and the photographers that create these unique images known as ambrotypes and tintypes. I'm your host, Chad Shryock, wetplate photographer for Pork Pie Photography based in Fort Collins, Colorado. In each episode, I've asked a modern-day practitioner to sit down with me and talk about how they got involved with this vintage process, share some information on their gear and studio, and provide some valuable insights into their creative process. So whether you're just beginning to dabble your toes in the collodion ethers, or you're a seasoned silverbath expert, hang on and see what develops with 10 questions. In this episode, we get to talk to not only a talented wetplate photographer, but also an artist who dabbles in music, pencil sketching, ink work, oil painting, and traditional film-based photography. I recognize her tintype work from the soft, dreamy qualities that she imparts into her images. Based in Chicago, Illinois, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Froula Weber to 10 Questions. Hey, Jennifer, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Chad, for having me. I'm so honored to be on the show with you and talk about the process, and I appreciate the wonderful introduction.
Great. So it sounds like you are a bit of a history nerd. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it is definitely safe to say. I think it all started, very young. I would always see antiques and especially, I think, old cameras, lenses, just industrial revolution pieces that kind of caught my attention. Not only were they aesthetically beautiful, but they were functioning in a way that, actually sparked my creativity and my mind in a way that not a lot of other things as a young child did. So I guess I kind of just grew up with that appreciation for the way people used to live, the way things were done in the past. And yeah, and it just kind of flowered into what I do today in a lot of ways. And I kind of in my work and my hobbies and my photography and my art, it's all influenced by the past in a big way.
That's great. Now, do you have any formal background in the arts, or is this just something that you figured out and you're like, hey, I've got these talents, I can do this?
Oh, that's very kind. I've always wanted to create from a young age again, and I think it's just kind of come naturally. I studied a little bit in a junior college, just taking random drawing classes, some, printmaking work, no photography, which is surprising. It was always on my to-do list. But yeah, ultimately, it was just all kind of like a study on my own that I did. And yeah, no formal training or instruction.
Okay. Well, let's talk about another Frola, Don Frola, your father. I follow him on Instagram. Seems like a
Yes.
really techie kind of guy. He's into like tinkering with radio transmitters and telephone, how to crack like the long distance code kind of thing that you used to see like in the
Yeah.
old movies, like War Games or something.
Right.
How much of an inspiration was that guy to getting you into all these different sorts of things?
I mean, he has always been a huge inspiration to me and just wanting to know how things work, how things operate, taking things apart. When he was a kid, he was always getting into trouble doing things in school that he probably shouldn't have in chemistry lab and just in terms of, doing his ham radio bed. And he was always very fascinated by all things engineering and chemistry and all of that, especially with just the phone engineering and communications and all that. So I like to say that I'm kind of like my dad's firstborn son in the way that I kind of my mind and his mind, I feel like work very similarly and we kind of appreciate the same things and we just seem to bond over that, especially. Growing up with my dad was extremely interesting because of the way his mind worked. There would be times where I'd come home and go down to the basement and I'd see that he had made a Tesla coil on his own, and there were sparks actually coming through the living room floor of our house. I mean, and we would be, my mom is there, I have brother and sister. We're all very young. This is probably like, 10 and under, and we're just all standing back. He's like, all right, I'm flipping the switch. Everybody, where are you at? You're in the back of that room. Okay, nobody go past this line. And so, yeah, I mean, it was growing up with my dad. I mean, this is the sort of stuff on a, regular occasion I would come home to. He would just be tinkering or building something, of this magnitude, and we'd all like, he'd move on to something else after that. But I mean, to be able to be exposed to that and kind of, him kind of sharing with me how all of these electronics worked and how all these science projects work definitely inspired me, I think, like with this tintype process. And yeah, yeah, he's just a great guy. And I've got lots of stories like that, but that's probably one of my favorite, coming home and finding a Tesla coil, like, sparks shooting through our living room floor, and like my mom and all the other kids like kind of huddled in the corner for safety while like, he tests this thing out. So
I tell
yeah,
you what,
it's
you
pretty
have got
great.
to keep your eyes on engineers with
Yeah.
stuff at the house.
There's a little bit of like a mad scientist look in their eyes. Like they're trying to be safe, but at the same time, they're trying to test the limits. So,
Well, that makes me feel good. I mean, I was gonna while you're talking about this, I was thinking back to I was probably in junior high or even earlier, elementary school, and I
mm,
built a Van de Graaff generator out of some metal salad bowls and a
oh
motor,
my
and
God.
making the
Yeah.
sparks and everything. So I was kind of thinking about that when you were talking about that story. So
Oh
that's
my God.
funny.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Yeah. I think you two have to definitely chat a little bit more. You two would absolutely, I'm sure you hit it off on, like, on Instagram, but in real life, I think you guys be talking for hours and hours. So,
That's great. Yeah, I'll
yeah.
drop him a note here.
So I feel like in terms of photography, he wasn't actually the person that got me into photography, but I can explain it a little bit how that kind of all came together, I guess, with my early experience.
Yeah, great. Yeah, let's talk about. You mentioned that you were a collector of vintage photographic gear. I mean, that is really the story of a lot of our guests that have been on the show. How long have you been collecting old cameras and old equipment?
I guess it started with my fascination with tintype photography. If we want to go there, a lot of people go on vacation to warm, beautiful, sunny beaches, and I wanted to take a road trip to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So I packed up my car, and my husband and I went out there, took a 12-hour drive, and just like stayed on the battlefield for about a week, and it was amazing. So, I was getting my fill of history, but also I was there. I really wanted to see if I could get a professional and legitimate tintype portrait taken. And at that point in time, I really had no idea what exactly a tintype was. I recognized it as being very separate from a silver gelatin print and other photographic processes, just from the unique look that a plate has. But I really had no idea. So I went to a photo studio in downtown Gettysburg, and I had my plate taken, and I watched the whole process from beginning to end, completely fascinated. I mean, a huge wooden large format camera with a big, huge brass lens on the other end of it. And I mean, the entire chemistry process was. I was like fixated, intoxicated, and I was in love. I mean, I had to figure out how to do it. It was very unexpected, and I was just I was very overcome with like, how do I get to do this process on my own. So on the 11-hour or 12-hour ride back from Pennsylvania, Gettysburg to Chicago, I started researching, and I was very pleased to know that, it was absolutely doable. You could absolutely make a tintype, get the chemistry supplies you needed on your own. And I reached out to my dad and I said, Dad, would you like to, do you want to learn tintype photography with me? And at this point, I mean, I had never shot an analog camera other than a Polaroid. So, and my dad had not shot film for years and years. So, it was just kind of a funny place to start in your analog journey, if that if that makes sense. So
That's
we,
that's a great bonding experience.
yes, yeah. So not to, I'm sure, I don't think there's many people out there that probably reach out to their dad with a text like, hey, dad, you want to learn this old analog, historic process from the 1800s? But he was, being my dad and him always wanting to know how things work and being an engineer, especially with all the mechanics of the cameras and whatnot and the chemistry involved, he was absolutely for it. So we started our journey. That was the beginning of it, right there. And we met the following week and we started figuring out how to source chemicals, how to sort of just source gear that wasn't terribly expensive, because at that point you're just kind of thinking, let's see if we can actually do this before investing in like, a $5,000 large format camera and lens and everything else that comes along with it. So we wanted to source the most affordable gear that we could in order to test the process out. So we started with a very basic Eastman Kodak Brownie camera, and we modified the back of the camera to hold a small plate. And then we would shoot on bulb, and do long exposures, in the backyard at my dad's for a week or two, maybe more, until we got an image. And we had all sorts of issues with the metals not working properly with the chemistry. We weren't coating the Brownie camera properly. So it took us a long time to figure out and troubleshoot what we were doing wrong until we started to see like a whisper of an image and the chemistry beginning to work for us, I should say. And it was so rewarding. I mean, when we got that first image, I mean, it was like the light through the clouds. I mean, we were, you know, hooting and hollering, like high-fiving. So it was, yeah, again, an amazing bonding experience. And then that was 7 years ago, and we're still doing it to this day.
Okay, 7 years ago. All right, so I was trying to think back. My wife and I had went to Gettysburg pretty early on in our marriage, and what a tremendous experience it would have been if we would have stopped in one of those old tintype shops at that time. Maybe I could have gotten into this like 20 years earlier than what I did.
I mean, if you're going to get into tintype photography, I mean, it almost seems a little bit too good to be true to be. I discovered this in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, downtown at the original photo studio that has existed there for how many years. So, yeah, it just felt right. I mean, the whole thing came together in a way that felt like I was always supposed to be doing this, and I'm so excited. I still feel in so many ways that I'm just starting my journey. There's so much left that I want to try to accomplish and do with it.
So you didn't really know that much about the process before you went into the photo studio there in Gettysburg. What is like the key thing that you remember most from that experience of being there?
Oh, I think, you have this amazingly historic setting. And I guess I think about how tintypes were an affordable way for everyone to carry a photo of their loved one or an image of their loved one with them, through these horribly difficult times. And especially in that point of history, there wasn't really, an affordable way to do that until a tintype. So I guess I sort of knew a little bit about it, like maybe the day before actually going into the studio and having the tintype shot,
Okay.
the tintype plate shot. So I guess, and before that, it was really just I kind of just always knew there was some weight and beauty to this very very old process that like I wanted to experience. So yeah, I guess going into that studio, climbing up the stairs, going upstairs, and I have to say I was actually dressed in 1800s clothing. So I had a hoop skirt on and I think 6 layers of clothing and
Did you bring that with you, or was that something that they had there?
oh no, it's everything they had there.
Okay,
So
okay, yeah.
I kind of I respected that. I didn't really expect that at first, but it's very hollowed, and I feel like the hallowed ground, and I feel like the process, especially in the Civil War, was very meaningful. So the fact that she was the woman that I wish I could remember her name. She no longer owns the tintype studio in Gettysburg, but she was very much a believer in like we should dress you in the way that you would originally have a tintype taken, not in just your everyday 2000, and I don't know what was now, but clothing. And I respected that. I thought that was great, and it really did add to the whole experience, being just putting those clothing items on and like standing in front of that camera. You just feel like you ultimately go back in time. I mean, you're just a part of all this history.
Right, right. So you had a 12-hour trip back where you got into doing a little bit of research. What were, I guess, the first resources that you actually used to try and figure out how to do the process with your dad?
Well, our craft chemicals, I guess that was the first one. You know what, I was I was kind of browsing and looking through a lot of message boards, looking at YouTube videos. YouTube was a huge help during those times. I mean, we found,
Absolutely.
yeah, multiple artists that were very generous in sharing their knowledge and, very eager to help, newcomers like learn the process and feel empowered and feel like they're capable of doing it. And I'm forever grateful for the people that videos I watched and the people that have continuously helped me in my tin type journey. Since the chemistry, I mean, you think you know it, but it can turn on you in a second, as we all know. So it's just great to have your peers and mentors all be like on your side and helping you, at the drop of a hat.
Yeah. Any manuals or, maybe it was period books, from the 1870s that you researched to be able to figure out the process?
You know what, I can't remember the name of it, the official name, but Mark Osterman came out with this very thorough guide, and it's very comprehensive for shooting tintype and mixing your own collodion. So I guess Mark Osterman was the first person, and like really the way that my dad and I approached our chemistry and approached the learning process.
Great, great. So you mentioned your first plate. Tell me what was the subject and how did it go? I mean, you said that you were excited when you got an image. What were the things that you remember most about that?
I guess, okay, well, we decided, okay, we have to coat the back of this brownie. I mean, the metals are not mixing with the plate correctly in a way where, we're getting an image forming with the chemistry. So, it was a lot of like little bit of troubleshooting here and there. And then, gradually as we were shooting plate after plate and adjusting things little by little, an image started to kind of appear in the middle of the plate. And the subject was, oh, my dad is going to laugh when he hears this. Okay, so the
Let's hear
subject
it.
was my dad's childhood bear, who was stuffed with sawdust. He's very well loved, and his name is Berber. So my dad has just always had him. He's got a lot of personality. He's missing like all of his hair. He's just a good subject. He's got a lot of texture. He's got beady glass eyes. He's loved and worn. And I guess in tintype, you kind of look for subjects that A, have a lot of, personality if you're doing like a still life, and also B, like interesting textures. And so he was our lucky first subject that worked. So it was Berber,
Berber
my
the
dad's
bear.
childhood teddy bear.
I am sitting in my youngest son's room now, and inside of a kind of a plastic display box is his little cookie monster that he
Oh,
got whenever he was a young baby. And I think it's probably along the same lines of one of his prized possessions. I think he's
oh,
hoping to give to one of his kids someday. So
oh, I
maybe we'll
love
have
that.
to take a picture of Cookie at some point.
Yes, I would like to see that. I got one plate of cookie for sure. I would love to see that.
So you shoot both portraiture and still life using this process. Do you have a favorite subject?
Oh, that's hard. I don't have a favorite subject. But I can tell you that when I shoot, I do like to do I think of it as like person, place, and thing. And I know that kind of sounds a little strange, but I love to approach it in a cinematic way, the way that I make a plate or a way that I create an image. I want it to tell a story and to have a narrative. So that's really the way I go about it. I kind of just follow my muse and follow whatever mood that I'm in, what's going through my head at that point, and Maybe it was a movie I saw recently or just some sort of memory that came back to me that I wanted to capture. And then I will sketch it out actually in a sketch pad. I'll actually draw like a 4x5 or a 5x7 plate size in my sketchbook. And then I will kind of roughly map out how I want the scene to sit within the frame or on the plate, I should say. And then I will shoot it. And I think it helps me I guess that process in general really helps me dial into the mood that I'm going for, the look that I'm going for, and it kind of just makes the process go more seamlessly from start to finish. I'm not fooling around with how to get that composition within the frame. It's just already sort of placed in front of me. I can kind of a little bit, take a step back from it, look at it objectively, and try to recreate it in my frame, in my viewfinder.
Now, how do you go about selecting subjects for these different shots?
I I really just get inspired by antiques and vintage. Also, watching old silent movies, I think. I mean, I just have a lot of old items sitting around my house. So, a lot of old antiques, a lot of vintage. I've been collecting for a long time. So, some of them will like kind of come together in my mind and I'll kind of play with that and I guess in a still life and put them together in a way that feels right or on par with the mood or the aesthetic I'm going for, and I'll shoot that. I guess that's for how I do a still life. And then for more landscape scenes or I shoot a lot of old houses. I feel like old houses just have like wonderful souls. I just like to think about the lives that have been lived in them, and there's something just very poetic about an old building for me. So I will go out and shoot old houses. I'll take my the large format camera out in the middle of the street, and people are just driving by or riding by on their bikes looking at me like, what is going on here? So
Tends
that's
to draw
always,
attention for sure.
oh, always. Yeah, no matter. It's a great conversation starter. So yeah, I mean, I like to say that I have more of a way of choosing my subjects, but they kind of choose me, I think, a lot of times. And I just, it's kind of fun to just, I guess go into the studio and like kind of think about what I'm shooting or what I like to shoot or what I feel like is going through my head during that day or like invoking a memory or an aesthetic or something maybe I saw in an old silent movie and feeling like I want to create that mood or like maybe how do I do that with what I have here at my disposal?
Nice. Well, Jennifer, let's talk a little bit about your studio workspace. Where do you shoot primarily? I take it it's at or around your home?
It is. So I normally I've always lived in old houses going on, old historic homes and whatnot. Again, I just find them very romantic and I like to think about the people that have lived in these spaces. So yeah, I mean, usually the houses I'm in have a lot of character, so they act as a great back set or backdrop, I should say. And I'm usually in an old neighborhood, one that probably dates back to the 1800s or a little earlier. So going outside my door too, I mean, there's just, really mature trees and overgrowth and really pretty Victorian homes kind of peeking out everywhere. So yeah, just everything has a lot of character and age. So it kind of fits, the style that I'm going for in a really nice way. So I shoot here. I have a little room where I can do portraits, but for the most part, I'm pretty mobile and I just go wherever I can. I do have a mobile setup that I have and take around with me in the hatchback of my Honda Fit. So
Okay.
that's pretty nice. I don't shoot mobily that way as much as I want to, but I think that's more of me wanting to maybe drive further out than the boundaries of Illinois and try to see a little bit more what's out there geographically.
Now, mostly natural light for your lighting?
Yes, always most always natural light. And it's not, I mean, I do have quite a few, Pulsey buff strobes and lighting equipment, that you would find in a typical portrait studio, but there's just something about natural light. So if I could opt to shoot for natural light or with natural light, I choose to shoot with natural light.
Okay, very nice. Let's hear about this portable darkroom. What's the setup for that?
So it is actually a light box, a very large light box that I have sealed up and made sure that it's light tight and safe, so nothing is leaking through. And I have it on, I mean, it's such a basic setup. And I really the way I've been shooting for the last 7 years is based on like the fact that I've been kind of moving around and living in different older rental homes. So I never want to set up anything super permanently. And I think it's worked out in my favor because now I feel very comfortable just loading up this portable darkroom basically in the back of my hatchback and driving around, and I can shoot anywhere and not feel like I have to alter, the steps in my process, from beginning to end. It just all feels very naturally.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And if you're
So
shooting there at the house, do you use the same dark box or do you have kind of a dedicated area for that?
I use the same one. I have two actually. So I have one, I drive around with it in the back of my car. People think always have questions on it. So it's always sitting in the back of my car. And then the other one is always stationed in, I mean, I have a little attic that right now that I'm shooting out of in the top floor of my house. And, it has a little skylight in it, which isn't ideal, but we cover that up. And it's a very small space, but, I've got running water in there and yeah, I've got a little system that works, and I've gotten very comfortable with it, and it's not elaborate or anything, but it does the job just fine.
Okay, so let's talk about gear. Since you're a collector of sorts, you mentioned that your first camera that you've started learning the process with was that little Brownie. How many different cameras have you used for wet plate?
I let me think about this. I think I've used four cameras in total. The first being that Brownie camera that you mentioned. Second, I ended up moving to a Graflex Super Graphic, an old press camera from the
Okay,
30s,
yeah,
proven to be extremely reliable. I mean, it looks a little bit like a Frankenstein. I've got an old brass Bosch and Lomb lens that's hanging off the front of it, and but I mean, what an amazing camera to learn wet plate photography on. I mean, we modified, my dad and I actually modified the film holder to hold a plate, and the modification process was so seamless and easy, and it was almost like that holder was made to hold a plate. It's just nice and deep and it's secure, and there's a lot of room inside of that plate holder, or I'm sorry, that film holder, to fashion a plate inside of it and secure it properly. So I mean, I used that for probably the last 5.5, 6 years.
okay. This is a 4x5 sized camera or similar?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Four
yep.
by five. Yes.
Use the old Graflock film pack adapters then.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
You got it.
those are very handy. Yep.
They are. And they're kind of hard to come by. I guess they used to be a little easier, but I think nowadays when I stumble across one, I just snatch it up because as with time and using the chemistry and whatnot, the plate, the holders tend to rust and, from washing and all that. So I never want to not be able to use that Graflex. So I'm very happy with that camera. But I also felt like 4 by 5, while it's a great plate size to start with, I really wanted to get into something larger. And also, I wanted an older camera body. So I ended up just recently, within the last year and a half, purchasing a Kodak, Eastman Kodak 2D 5 by 7 view camera, wooden body, completely different looking from that Graflex. And I love it. I love it. I think it's one of those cameras that I'll probably have for the rest of my life as well. And aesthetically, it's just beautiful. It's a deep red wood, and just everything about it just feels so much a part of the process. And aesthetically, it's just very, very pretty and beautiful. And I love using it. However, it's extremely different than using the Graflex. I just feel like using a more aged, especially a wooden framed camera, comes with its challenges.
They're a
So
little bit rickety.
they are. And I'm a little hard on my cameras. I hate to admit it. I get really focused in the moment and I start really pushing that camera kind of to its fullest abilities to get, I almost like stretch out the bellows a little bit too far to get that close up shot. And You have to be a little careful, of course, with the older cameras. But I think I'm so used to working with a tank like the Gray Flex, I sort of sometimes forget that I'm working with something a little bit more delicate.
Right, right. Well, you seem to do a lot of videos on Instagram and other social media platforms. I always thought it would be interesting to do some episodes that would be like, Will It Shoot a Tintype series, and just use like any cameras that you've got, or, some old Mentos boxes or something, that you could use to try and fashion a camera from.
Yeah. I mean, anything that's light tight, right? Oh, I have to tell you though, one other camera that I've shot with, since I did say that I shot with four. This is a very, very short-lived sort of endeavor, but I did modify a Polaroid back for the Hasselblad 500 and shoot very, very small square plates on that for maybe a few months. But then I got very nervous about the chemistry getting all over the Hasselblad, so I
Yep.
retired that process. Yeah.
So your 5x7 Eastman, that's probably the oldest camera that you've got that gets some daily use. What about lenses?
Lenses, I have a Darlo Petzval brass lens. I think that's 1900s. And then Bosch and Lomb, I've got a few of those. One that's a dedicated portrait lens, which is nice. And then one that's actually a projector lens that which is much more affordable. It doesn't have the Waterhouse stops in it, but it still yields some really interesting results. So, and then I have a few Schneider lenses, which, give this more modern look and a lot more control, obviously, because there's a shutter involved to my plates. And I do really love how that Schneider lens actually captures the tintypes. It's not the most like beautiful. Like I think people when they see you during the process, they want to see you using those brass lenses, but a lot of times I'll opt for the Schneider. And if I'm doing a portrait, people will be a little disappointed. So I'll have to do both and kind of like show them the differences. I'm like, okay, we'll use the other one. We'll put this one on for the picture, or the video that you're shooting, and then we'll switch over. But yeah, I think there's just, it's overwhelming. There's so many tools to use. I mean, and that would yield like different and amazing and very, unique results. And I think that's what's kind of intoxicating about the process. Like you have this very old, very beautiful way to capture images, but then you have all of these lenses and tools to kind of create different sizes and different, lens quality. And like, I get really caught up and a little overwhelmed with how many options there are. And it's kind of like a runaway train, actually. I have a lot of old cameras and lenses in my collection. So, but those are the main ones that I use for wet plate.
Yeah, I mean, I- I've heard of a lot of photographers being very snobbish on lenses, but I've never heard an expectation from the sitters themselves that they want to see those big brass lenses.
Yeah, it happens. It's kind of funny. I mean, it's okay though. I understand. I sort of understand where they're coming from, and I guess if I had a choice, I would want my photo or my tintype to be taken with an old brass that dated back to the 1800s rather than something that maybe was a little bit newer from the 30s or the 40s.
Yeah. So one of the standard questions on the show here is that if you had the chance to photograph anybody today, who would it be?
That's so hard.
And it
Oh,
could be a historical figure for you as well, since you're a self-proclaimed history nerd.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I think Napoleon then.
Okay, Napoleon.
I think Napoleon. I think that would be very interesting and a very good conversation. But I mean, I think also like dream person, but like dream subjects, I think would, again, like me just taking my camera out and the process out on the road and like just doing a road trip and just really going out on the East Coast where like the very oldest of homes are in this country. And maybe, I mean, honestly, dreaming bigger, I would love to take my wet plate process overseas to Europe. I mean, that would be a wonderful thing to do. However, getting the chemistry over there is no easy feat. I mean, or you would have to source it, but that would be if I could shoot in Europe the wet plate process one day, that would be a dream come true.
Nice. And it seems like there's enough folks in the community that they could probably help you track down the chemistry once you get there, or even have it ready for you. So
I think so
I'd say
too.
just
Yeah.
reach out. You could find somebody
Yeah.
to get that going for you.
Thank Thank you. Yeah, I might just
Do
do that.
do you have a like if you could pick the type or the look of your sitter that would come in, what is the perfect subject for wet plate?
Mm. I would have to say someone timeless, someone maybe somebody that almost dresses like they lived on the prairie during the 1800s. I mean, just simple cotton dress or, overalls, like just very like simple silhouetted clothing and features and just I guess that's freckles are always a plus because I think freckles and blue eyes, that's
Yeah.
like probably my ideal sitter, I think would be that. Somebody that kind of just transcends like time and eras and in dress and the way their features and expressions are.
Yeah. You mentioned traveling for the purpose of taking images. What is, I guess, what's the idea? If you could travel around the states, what would be your ideal places to go, and what's the subject that you want to capture?
Mm. I feel like anything in New England, I mean, or Boston, I think just the old buildings, the shorelines. I would love to be able to take tintypes of horses, actually. I think that would be amazing. Like I've seen one or two tintype photographers who actually shoot riders and horses on the beach and at sunset, and it's just, I don't know, that would be something incredible. So just anything with age and history and timelessness and something that, creates a narrative and a story, I can weave it together in a way that kind of fits my style, but also, you're placed in this very old setting that, has so much to offer in terms of subjects, old houses, buildings, and, people that have a real affinity for history.
Yeah, what kind of projects have you got in the queue right now? I mean, are there things that you're working on that are kind of
Yeah,
in
actually.
play?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really talked about it yet, but I'm going to be starting to put a book together just
Nice.
because, yeah, I'd love to. The way that I shoot is I kind of invoke this kind of cinematographer way of shooting with the person, the place, and the thing. So to be able to take my body of work and put it on the pages of a book in a way that, uh, you know, that makes sense and kind of is true to my sense of style and direction, that would be ultimate for me. So I think that I'm very seriously considering putting all of that in a book in the near future.
And this is not just your collodion work. This would be everything as a body, or focused primarily on photography.
I think it would be everything as a body just so I wouldn't limit myself. I mean, with tintypes being absolutely focal, but I think there's been times that I've had, my Hasselblad with me or my Rolly cord, and, I've been able to capture an image or a mood or an aesthetic that I would want to bring into that book as well. And not that I don't have so many of those with the tintype process, but I feel like that would just round it out in a way that would be really complete to my vision.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I
Thank you.
know you use a lot of different mediums for your work, but why is collodion still relevant today?
I've never ever seen anything that meets my expectation of how things should look in my mind's eye other than the collodion process. When I used the collodion process and I saw it done for the first time, and just from the body of work that I've created, I there's there's just something about the way that the collodion process captures a mood and an image and an aesthetic that I've never seen anything else accomplish. And again, it's so close to my heart and so close to my mind's eye of what I want to invoke out of a scene and a situation. So that's really why it's always been relevant and always will be relevant for me.
Yeah, it sounds like you're planning to keep shooting for a lot of years to come using this process.
Yeah, absolutely. For as long as I live.
Yeah. How often do you come across folks that maybe come in to get their portrait taken, but they really don't know what to expect? I mean, are there those first timers that kind of step into it blindly, or are most of your sitters, they kind of have an idea of what to expect?
Most of them come into it blindly. I mean, they kind of see the aesthetic. I think with the rise of social media and, TikTok and Instagram and Reels these days, I think people get a little bit more of a taste of what that process looks like if they, type in the hashtag tintype, So a lot of them do know sort of what to expect, but being there in the moment and experiencing it for themselves. I mean, there's always that sense of magic there, the wide-eyed wonder and people over and over again say, I can't believe this just happened and you took this and it's like magic. I think if like it's like magic, I could put that in quotation marks. I hear that. If I had $1 for every time I heard that, that is a consistent response
Yeah.
to the collodion process. Yeah.
Yeah. Any unique or unusual, funny experiences that you've had while using the process?
Oh boy. Not super funny. I mean, I guess going out and shooting, you just get a lot of people approaching you and really interested in the process. It was, I've had people come up to me just on a whim and be like, what are you doing? What is this? And then I would explain it to them and I'd show them, I'd make a plate and they would be like, okay, can you, like, I'm going to try doing this. Like, and there's been so many people that you've just, it's so humbling. You inspire them and the process, inspires them. It's not you. It's really just showing them what that chemistry can do. And I mean, that's always kind of mind blowing to me how many times I go out with my camera, in a kind of a public setting and people approach me and they end up giving it a good try or, a lot of times like taking it all the way and really like doing it themselves and getting into the analog process. So that's really fun. I guess funny stories. Every every house that I've lived in the last 7 years has quite a few silver nitrate stains like in the kitchen and on the floor and
Yeah.
in the bathroom. So I'm sorry to all my past landlords. So there are silver nitrate stains. I've left my mark in every single house that I've lived in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's part of it.
It truly is, yeah.
So you mentioned these folks that get interested in the process just from seeing you perform it. What advice do you have for somebody that's really just getting started with wet plate?
I feel like the best way to get started with it is read as much as you can, watch as many YouTube videos as you can, reach out to people in the community because, I mean, everybody is very willing to share and very eager to share what they're doing and, the resources that they've used to get where they are. And I think everyone has like their own path, and just the way that the process makes sense to them and the way that they approach it is like fitting for the way they learn because everybody learns differently. So I feel like just reach out to people that you're shooting in a similar style to maybe what you're trying to aspire to, find a mentor in that respect and yeah, just start reading, just start watching as many videos as you can and talking to as many people as you can and step by step you'll be able to get to that point where, hopefully you're making plates yourself.
Yeah. Now it sounds like you're self-taught. I mean, you watched a lot of videos and got a maybe an instruction manual from the Ostermans. Have you had the chance to meet any other wet plate artists?
I was able to meet Blake, who is actually in Franklin, Tennessee. My husband and I lived there for a few years. So Blake is the only wet plate shooter I think I've been able to connect with. There's also actually that's not true. There's Doug Hansen, and he's actually in Elgin, Illinois, just not too far from me. And my dad and him have been able to connect, and myself, and that's been really great. But yeah, I mean that's definitely on my list to make more connections with wet plate shooters in the area. There's been talks of trips and like sort of retreats with a bunch of peers in the wet play community. The women that I actually talk to a lot and we troubleshoot together, a little group of us, and we have another one hopefully coming up in the future. But I think COVID has kind of sometimes put a little bit of stop to that, and everyone's so busy. But it's definitely like on my list to try to connect with a lot more wet plate photographers. I ultimately just really talk to a lot of people on social media and Instagram. I just feel like it's like an easy way to connect and see each other's work. But if I'm ever in the area, I would love to get together with some of them. The Penumbra team, I think in New York City, is probably going to be next on my list to connect with because I go to New York a lot for work. So it's only a matter of time, I'm sure, before I stop in the studio there.
Great place. Ask to see
Hmm.
the lens closet there.
Oh my God, Jeffrey's, yeah, lens closet. That's the stuff that dreams are made of.
Exactly.
Hmm.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you think people might make early on in the process, and what's the best way to avoid those?
I feel like the biggest mistake people make is that they don't understand that the steps of the chemistry work in a way that is, they're working in a unifying way together, but at the same time, the materials, the gear that you're using, they all have to be working in a way that's very synchronized and just just in a way that is not cross-contaminating, that you're thinking about when you are developing a plate and then going to put it in the fixer, please take off your gloves. I think I see a lot of people do this. They start to make a new plate, pour the collodion on the plate with those gloves on still. And I think, sometimes obviously that the fixer and that developer can really interfere with the next plate that you're making. And I guess I've just from experience too, I've talked to a lot of people that have reached out to me, and that is one of the number one things I think I've told people about troubleshooting is that, you need to be either rinsing your gloves off or changing them or using a different set of more sustainable eco-friendly gloves, for each step of that process and be really mindful of that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Hmm.
Especially, you don't want to get things into your silver bath because that is the one that's the moneymaker there, right? And
Oh
you're
yeah.
reusing that one all the time. Yeah, fixer or something else in there is probably not a good idea.
No, no, absolutely not. Yeah, that's the big no-no.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the folks that you've actually had a chance to meet. Who are some of the people that kind of helped you along in the early days of your own learning experience?
I have to say that one person that is continuously helped me throughout my entire career is a tintype shooter and a photographer is Paul Barden. He is so good. He's Crown of Frogs on Instagram. If any, I'm sure people have known that, but
Okay.
he's fantastic, very knowledgeable, and like a constant source of, knowledge when it comes to gear, when it comes to troubleshooting processes that aren't working quite right. He just very easily, very efficiently, like will help me and answer my questions, which is wonderful. I feel like Jeffrey Berliner is actually a really great, and Jolene Lupo, those two are excellent. I feel like there's been times where I've reached out to them or they've seen me struggling with something that I've posted about on a social media post and they have offered their excellent guidance. And so I'm very thankful to them for that throughout the years. So, yeah, I guess those three in general have really been keeping me afloat and keeping me motivated and just, being there when I needed them most.
Yeah, that's a great list of mentors.
Yeah, thank you.
Have
Mhm.
you had the chance to actually teach this process to anybody else yourself?
Not yet. But I feel like, down the road, I think that that's definitely a possibility to do a little workshop or, I have private lessons or whatnot. I've gotten approached by people multiple times. It's just one of those things that I need to allow time for and a space for too. As I was saying, like we've been living in some rentals from the last, 7 years. So I feel like this next place that we're going to be in is going to be a little bit more of a larger space that would be um, actually, much better for teaching and, moving around. I just feel like I try to imagine trying to teach somebody in my little attic right now, and I feel like it could just turn into a disaster. So if the space and time allows, yes, I would absolutely, yeah, be willing, and I would love to teach. That would be, yeah, a dream come true, honestly, to share that with another person and give that to them.
That's great. So you do have a pretty significant camera collection. Is there anything that you're currently on the lookout for now?
Oh boy, that's that's a loaded question. I'm trying to think of how I can answer that. In my mind, you can never have too many Bosch and Lone portrait lenses. So I'm actually looking for an additional Bosch and Lone portrait lens for my 5x7 Kodak, Eastman Kodak view camera. I
Okay.
just feel like the one that I have is great, but I feel like I'm just looking for something that has a little bit more of a petzl swirl to it, and the one that I have doesn't quite do it for me, like my Darlo that I use on my Reflex Speed Graphic.
Okay. Your 5x7, is that the largest camera that you've got? Plate
That's
size.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Any thoughts on moving up to 8x10 or even larger?
Yes, absolutely. I'm kicking myself a little bit. I think I really should have gotten an 8x10 large format camera as my step up from the 4x5 Graflex and just used a reducer to do 5x7 plates because because but I think that's ultimately like I was kind of telling myself, well, it's okay. When you're ready to buy an 8x10 camera, you'll be ready. It's probably just an excuse to buy and add more cameras to my collection. So, yes, I think 8x10 is definitely in my future. And I think I would go a little bit more modern with the camera body that on the 8x10.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I mean, of course, I started off with a 4x5 speed graphic, but then my step up from there was an Eastman 2D 8x10. So
Oh.
that's the my rickety wooden camera that I use.
Mhm.
And then last year I purchased an 8x10 Cambo, which really gives me all of the adjustments that I could ever want. I don't have a lot of that stuff on the old Eastman, but the Cambo has got it. So it's really gives you a lot more flexibility. But
Yeah.
monorail camera is just a big one to haul around anywhere, though. That's the only thing I don't like about it.
It's very true. And yeah, again, fragile and beautiful aesthetically, but yeah, I believe just doing a little something with a more modern frame and having that ability to kind of push that camera to different limits or to in different ways that, are going to meet your vision. I think I'd feel safer going with a more modern camera the way that I shoot, I think.
Yeah. Okay, Jennifer, what's the best way for folks to see your work or maybe even have their portrait taken by you?
Oh, great. Well, you know what? You can reach out to me on my Instagram account handle. It's Jennifer Froula Weber Photography. Or you can email me at jenniferfroulaweber@gmail.com. Those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me at this point. I also have a website, jenniferfroulaweber.com. So those three ways. And the best way to see my work right now is through my website, but a more complete look at my work would be my social profile on Instagram.
Great. How important has it been to have access to social media for this type of art?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I I feel like I can't express enough how that sense of community, that ability to share in a very easy visual way has made this process so much more to me in my life. I mean, the people that I've connected to, and I'm almost gushing about it. I feel like if you are going to start this process, being part of that social media, the Instagram community, is really almost like imperative to kind of reaching out to other people and just getting connected to this community. It's a small community, but it's a very tight-knit, very close community that is always again willing to share with you and, help you along on your journey.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks a lot, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you, Chad.
Great
This
to
has
talk to
been
you.
really great. Really good to talk to you too. I look forward to hearing the podcast and all of your other guests that you're having in the future on this season.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode and maybe even picked up some insights that will help you along in your own wet play journey. I'd love to hear from you on who you'd like to have on in a future episode. So send me a message and follow our Instagram account at 10 questions with any feedback. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast provider. Thanks for listening to me, Chad Shryock, and my expert guests, and I look forward to you joining me again in the coming weeks for a new episode of 10 Questions.